Welcome to Action on Pain, a podcast dedicated to highlighting the significant efforts underway in Canada to address chronic pain.
By presenting perspectives from individuals who live with pain, researchers, clinicians, and other stakeholders, we explore various impacts on people's lives and the initiatives, research endeavors, and the committed professionals working to effect meaningful change.
This work is guided by Health Canada's Action Plan for Pain. Join us as we raise awareness and share stories that are shaping the future of pain management in Canada.
Welcome to Action on Pain, a podcast where we explore the landscape of chronic pain. I'm Keith Meldrum, and as always, I'm joined by Jennifer Daly-Cyr and Virginia McIntyre.
That's right. We're your hosts. I am Virginia McIntyre, and like many of you listening, we navigate the daily realities of persistent pain.
And I'm Jennifer Daly-Cyr. Our mission is to shine a light on the progress being made within the framework of Health Canada's An Action Plan for Pain in Canada to make a real difference in people's lives. Today, we are very pleased to have Dr. Nader Ghasemlou join us. Dr. Ghasemlou is an associate professor at Queen's University and is the head of the Pain Chronobiology and Neuroimmunology Laboratory. He and his research team are working on the intersection of neuroimmunology, pain physiology, and circadian biology. All projects in this lab include RNA sequencing to identify genes, pathways, regulating cell functions, and patient cohort studies, providing a transitional component to all projects. It's such a pleasure to welcome you here, and we're very eager to hear about your research and your insights for all those impacted by persistent pain. So, Nader, you and I met way back, 2018, as I recall, at a CPS conference. And I recall
That's right.
a discussion that we had at that time because I was just getting to know the whole area of basic science and trying to understand what that meant. I remember you telling us a story about when you were doing your postdoc stories and the first time you met someone with spinal cord injury was the topic of your study and how it opened your eyes in terms of patient engagement. We would love for you to be able to just sort of talk about your work. You're both in basic science and I know in the clinical side as well now. And if you could tell us how you go about that day-to-day life, what your lab looks like, how it contributes to the goals of the Action Plan for Pain, and how you engage partners, patient partners.
That is a loaded question.
It's a loaded question.
A lot there.
Yeah, I was a traditional bench scientist. And so that means when I was doing my PhD, for instance, I was in a research laboratory on a day-to-day basis at the bench doing science, using animal models to better understand disease. And my focus was on spinal cord injury and trying to understand how we can make people walk again was the focus of really all the research that was in spinal cord injury at the time. And then I had met for the first time someone who was living with a spinal cord injury near the end of my PhD. And he was actually a plant biologist who got into a car crash and got a spinal cord injury and then decided to shift his entire career and focus to try to find a cure for spinal cord injury. And I was really taken aback by this amazing change in direction that someone would take. And we began to talk, became really good friends. And I was asking him about, the work that we're doing. And he said, you're always talking about making us walk again. But we have other things that are affecting our daily lives that we aren't looking at. And it was really important for me to hear that because then I began to dig into the literature. And he had mentioned that chronic pain was one of the things that he lived with as a result of his injury. Mm-hmm. And when I dug into the literature, I realized that actually walking again is not in the top 3 list of priorities for people living with spinal cord injury.
Interesting.
It's things like return of sexual function, bowel and bladder movement, and chronic pain are the top 3. Walking, I think, is number 4 or 5 on the list.
Fascinating.
And Yeah, and it's like, why are we always just looking at a mouse trying to walk again as opposed to these other factors? Luckily, the field has really evolved since the early 2000s of saying, listen, there are complex factors that are at play in terms of how someone recovers from injury. And so we need to be looking at the person experience and using that to guide the research that we're doing. And so that's why I decided to go into chronic pain research, was to try to help people like my friend who have a spinal cord injury to relieve that chronic pain that he felt. And so went again into the bench science world to try to do that with our preclinical models. And when I began my own lab, I made the conscious decision to change how I ran things because of how my postdoc supervisor did things. And he always said, think about the person first.
Mm.
And so I decided to change the way I ran my research from going from bench to bedside to bench. And the hope then is to go from bedside to bench and then back to the bedside again more efficiently. And one of the proteins that I was looking at as a PhD student in spinal cord injury isn't even expressed in people with spinal cord injury. It's not in the spinal cord. So who cares? So we were doing all this work in the lab, which was great at understanding the biology of cells, but at the end, it's not going to help someone with a spinal cord. And so if we start with people first, and then we take that data into the laboratory, I think we can have a much greater impact in what we do. And I think a quicker time to discoveries going to the clinic and trying to help people, which is the ultimate goal of anybody who's doing research.
Fascinating. I love how
It
that
is, and
has
I think
gone. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I have a friend who is a spinal cord injury, and it's interesting how, just listening to their personal experience, because it's a very misconception that people with spinal cord injury don't have pain.
Yeah.
So it's nice how that's what you got from the personal experience. You understood more. It's amazing.
Exactly, because you think they can't feel.
Yeah. What I love about your story, Nader, is, and I heard it before when we were at CPS, and it did really hit me, was you were dealing with rats and you were trying to get them to walk again, but you can't ask the rat or the mouse what's important to them. So you're like, well, of course they want to walk. And so then to hear somebody who lives with a spinal cord injury say it's down on the list, the fact that you took that in completely and fully and didn't be like, well, they don't know what they're talking about, even though it's their life, you pivoted and you made this change, and I'm all about basic science. I love the work that happens, but you can't ask a mouse what's the most important thing in their life. You can ask a person what's the most important thing in their life.
Exactly.
I love that story.
Yeah. So that was what caused the change. And so my lab now really does its best to understand the human experience. And one of us lives with chronic pain, but it used to be none of us lives with chronic pain and doesn't have that lived experience. And so changing the way that we do our research to say, let's find people who have that lived experience and understand what pain is and how their pain affects their lives on a biological level, on a psychological level, on a social level, and then try to take that and, like Keith said, bring it to the mouse and say, okay, if I try to alter this gene or protein, or this environmental factor, or this food that you're eating, how does this affect your pain outcomes? That we can test. And we can do it a lot more quickly in the laboratory and understand the mechanisms that are causing this, which will help us find drugs, right? Like once you know the mechanism, you can make the drug.
Yep.
And then we can get it to people more quickly.
That is extremely fascinating. One of the questions that just popped into my mind, when you make this fundamental shift as a bench or a basic scientist to say, well, we're going to deal with the mouse and all these hypotheses and theories that we have, when you change that lens and you say, let's ask people what they want, when you bring that to your lab and your students, how was that received with those early on in their not even their career, their education, about, hey, we're going to talk to people and they're going to tell us what they want, and then you're going to do some of this work. How did that go?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really great question. And I'll tell
Interesting.
you, the answer is going to surprise you, but
Okay.
then the follow-up is not.
All right.
The students loved the idea.
Oh,
The
okay.
students said, this is obviously, why aren't we doing this? Right? Isn't that how it's always been done?
Oh.
Mm.
And then when I mentioned to my colleagues who are at the bench that we have partners with lived experience who work with us on our projects and help us guide our research, not even 9 times out of 10, 10 times out of 10, the response that I get is, what?
Oh.
You have somebody else telling you what to do?
Oh.
That's not how we do science.
Oh my.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there's a real disconnect and a miscomprehension, right? Misunderstanding between bench scientists and what I believe is a movement to change how we do science. And it is bench scientists are under the impression that people with lived experience are going to come in and tell them what to do, as opposed to coming in and sharing their experiences and saying, these are priorities for me. And these are priorities for other people like me because I'm part of networks, right? Like when you live with a disease like pain, you have a network
Mm-hmm.
of people who support you and from whom you draw support from. And that network grows. So in the multiple sclerosis community, we've known this for years, where on the grant panel, we have people with lived experience on the grant panel,
Mm-hmm.
and they score the grants with us. And we take into account the importance of the work to them and their community in deciding who and what gets funded. That doesn't happen really anywhere else that I'm aware of. Maybe Arthritis Society does this as well. I think that they have a strong push for that. But outside of these two, I don't really know of any organization that does that. And I hope that that is something that we can change the minds of. And I'll give you an example, actually. So I'm on a panel right now that is trying to update how pain research is done. And one of the key points that I'm fighting for is that one of the core tenets of pain research should be incorporating the lived experience into our work, whether it's at the bench or at the bedside. And I've gotten a lot of pushback from people that, again, I don't want someone to tell me what to do. And I've had to tell them, no one is telling you what to do. They're not telling you how to do it. They're giving you another lens through which to see your own work. And that's a change that I'm hoping will happen, especially with this new generation of
Mm-hmm.
scientists that we're training, who are a lot more aware of these facts. At least the ones in my lab are, because I've, have brought it into the group. And like you said, Keith, right? I thought there was going to be pushback,
Mm-hmm.
but so my group has also evolved over time, right? So we've gone from being a purely bench lab to now being a bench and clinical lab.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people who sit in the clinical side of the lab don't sit in an office alone by themselves. They are integrated into every single bench project. And so the two sides of the lab are talking to each other. And
Oh,
that's something I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing my PhD.
yeah.
And so now that we have that, it does change how we do our research, where the bench is talking to the clinical and the clinical is talking to the bench. And I think that if we can have that, I mean, that's not going to happen in every lab, but if we could have a way of making that easier for all the bench scientists, it could really change how things are done.
Yeah, and on that, thank you for being the trailblazer on this and,
Mm-hmm.
showing, essentially showing a model of how it can be done, because maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on how you took things from basic bench to clinical, that might help also demonstrate that.
Yeah, I think so. The clinical world isn't for every bench scientist. We like our,
What a nice way to say
let's-
that.
I remember you
it's
saying
a
way
much.
back, I'm a mouse guy, I'm not a people guy.
I'm a mouse
Yeah,
guy,
right.
exactly.
I love that.
Exactly. I am so it's weird because at heart I still do feel like a mouse guy because I find it hard in general to talk to people.
Okay.
And so just anybody, right? But to force myself to be in that environment has changed who I call myself. And it's funny because we were having this conversation recently where I said to a colleague, I'm a neuroimmunologist. And the reply that I got was, no, 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 you're a pain scientist who's doing neuroimmunology.
Ah.
I thought, I never thought of myself as a pain scientist. Thanks so much for thinking that, I'm at that level because
Mhm.
I've come into the pain world with a focus on neuroimmunology. So that does, we put ourselves in boxes, right? And I think that we need to remove the boxes so that we can see the whole spectrum of things that are out there.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'm itching. Sorry, I just got to. Sorry, you can see it. Those who are listening can't see me just bouncing. You said we put ourselves in boxes.
Yeah.
Do you think that happens a lot because it's safe?
It's easy.
It's easy. Oh.
It's not only safe, but
Ah.
it's easy as well.
Okay.
I think that it's not only easy, but it's not only safe, but it's also easy because we survive in research on grants.
Yes. Yep.
And without funding to do research, we can't do the work that we want to do to make people's lives better, right? Whether it's the bench scientist,
Mhm.
the clinical scientist, or the translational scientist like me. The problem is selling your ideas to an audience that is only clinical or only basic is very hard. And it's a lot easier to sell your idea to an only basic or an only clinical audience. To get those two people in the same room, understanding the same material is hard. It's hard to do that. And so I remember the first time I wrote a grant that was 50% basic science, 50% clinical science, it got trashed. It got trashed by the clinical person, it got trashed by the basic person, and the one person who was translational in the middle was like, this is a great idea. So it's easier to write a grant that's focused solely on the clinical or solely on the basic. Luckily, we're seeing now more and more that our largest funding agency, CIHR, is looking to change how we do that. And it's really, I think, because of foundations like MS Canada, like Arthritis Society, that are Cancer Society. Those are all changing how they fund work, where they say it's the lived experience, the patient experience has to be central to whatever you're doing.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we're getting there now, slowly, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, Nader, too. You say you're getting there and you want the lived experience at the table, and I'm home right from the start. How do you engage with people with lived experience? How do you get them the grants? How do you invite them? How do you
Mhm.
find these
Yeah.
lovely people that are out there?
I really have the Chronic Pain Network to thank for this. And that's a CIHR strategy for patient oriented research network that was set up to bring scientists and people with lived experience together in the same room at once.
Mhm.
The scientists who are primarily in most of these spores, if you go and you look at it, it's 90% clinical scientists, whether it's people who interact directly with patients or who are in advocacy or some other form of direct contact with the public. There's very few bench scientists in these networks. And so when I came in, I got thrown into this world of people talking together that I didn't understand. And so I thought this is actually a really great opportunity to learn, like how I had from my friend with a spinal cord injury,
Mhm.
what chronic pain really is. Because I've never had chronic pain. My dad did. And I would hear about how he was dealing with his fractured hip all the time. But it's been in talking with partners like Jen, like Leslie Singer, like Jenny Lorca, like Keith, and like you, Virginia, right? Just chats. And it's usually been these organic just conversations of, tell me about what it's like. How's it going? What are things that affect you that you get these ideas that pop into your head? And one of the things that we had was, for instance, we were working on a project looking at rhythms of pain. And I had a discussion. I was talking with Leslie about her pain and whether it had a rhythm. And I remember this. I was sitting in the car chatting with her about it, and she said, it depends which pain you're asking me about, because one of my pain symptoms gets worse during the day and one gets better during the day. I thought, that is wild. And we got to figure out what that means at a biological fundamental level. And so that has set off like a complete tsunami of work in my lab now, trying to figure out what these rhythms are and what they mean at the biological level. And we're hoping that this will inform not only drug discovery, but also how people are treated for their pain and how we do clinical trials ultimately. Because when a clinical trial happens, right, when do they ask someone to rate their pain? They ask them in a good trial is once a week. And a great trial that has a lot of money will ask once a day, but you don't know what time of day the person is giving you their score. And you don't know, are they giving you their score at the moment? Are they giving you what they felt was their worst score of the day? Are they giving you an average score? It really depends on the type of question that's asked. And when it's answered, now we know is really important because a person's pain changes in that 24 hours. Yeah.
That is wild. And, I want to wrap this up. Not wrap it up, but we talk about the action plan. And goal 4 of that action plan, this is the technical portion. It says pain research and related infrastructure enables discovery, catalyzes innovation, and results in the translation of knowledge into real-world impact. That's a very detailed, administrative, government-y kind of statement. What you've just told us is that happens through conversations with people sitting in a car about tell me what your pain's like. And then you take those personal experiences and you move them into research and to knowledge mobilization and translation. It doesn't have to be this overly complicated, in-depth study, which, those are important. Conversations with people who live with it. That's what just struck me in your comments.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that will help shape research questions and new directions.
Yeah. And, maybe some of the more traditional bench and research scientists, like as you said, Nader, thanks for sharing that you find it hard to talk to people. Maybe that is a little bit of a challenge to talk to people, but isn't that where the nuggets come out and the aha moments like you had with Leslie Singer? It's like, oh, that's interesting. We need to find out about that. Would that have ever happened in a more formal setting? I don't know.
No, I don't think it would have.
As he says, with great commitment.
Exactly. Yeah, no way.
No, but I like that. We're honest.
So yeah, it is a very honest thing where I think if you're in a formal setting, everybody is guarded. They're much more careful with what they say and how they say it. Whereas I try to be open and honest in all of my conversations, much to my detriment sometimes. But I think it's the easier way of doing it, right? Which is why I think all of us get along because we are open and honest people. And I think that just comes from experience of it's just easier that way. And so when you have your walls down and you talk on that level of, it's the two of us or the four of us or all of us in a room talking openly together, and no one is wrong and no one is right.
Yep.
We're all on the same page. It does really help things.
But that speaks to some of your colleagues who are like, what do you mean somebody's going to come in and tell you how to do it? Like, no, we're just sharing together. Scientists and people are sharing experiences. And that truly is a synergistic algorithm. Like, I mean, it's 1 and 1 is 75.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's telling anybody what to do. It's having open conversation. I love it.
And, having been a part of your lab now as a patient partner for a few years, Nader, I can say everything that you're describing here is exactly the experience. And I think that's a really phenomenal way to approach it because, if a group of people are sitting at a table, a virtual table or otherwise, and you have a chance to chat and talk through things, that's welcoming viewpoints, it's welcoming perspectives, and they may or may not be relevant at that moment, but it's nonetheless welcoming to that. How would you say that the work you're doing is contributing to the action plan for pain in Canada? Like, I mean, I can make some guesses at it, but I'd love to hear
Yeah.
your perspective.
So there's different ways I think that we're contributing to it. The first is, and I think the one that I think is the most important, is we are trying to bring pain research to the forefront of the conversation. And we've been lucky because we can use both biology, the underlying biology, as well as the clinical and the lived experience side of it to send the message out about the work that we're doing and about the work that others are doing in the area within the field. The importance of the research that's being done is really, I think, for me, the primary one of importance and of worry at the same time. Canada and Canadian pain scientists really punch above our weight globally. We are a pain powerhouse, a little bit because of the history of pain science, having really, with Ron Melzak's work at McGill, being paramount to how pain is discussed, to the basic research that's being done now from coast to coast. It's just huge. But there's a lot of worry because the government has not invested the kind of funding needed to make sure that pain remains a priority. When 1 in 5 people in Canada live with chronic pain, and the number one reason why someone goes to see a doctor is because of pain, we should be funding pain much better than we are right now, right? And so that's something that really, I think that we as a community need to try to advocate for and maybe even try to find solutions to.
And sorry to interrupt, but on that note, Nader, I mean, I've often thought, imagine a world where there could be more investment in order to save money to the healthcare system down the road. Imagine if there could be more preventative measures taken and sort of that investment on prevention so that the long-term costs are lessened over time. I mean, they just have to be. I haven't run the numbers. I have no way to do that, but I can only imagine.
I mean, the lost productivity numbers, I think, are in the billions, right? And if you can put that back into the economy again, and into people's pockets, because it's people not being able to work, it really does change what we would be capable of doing as a country.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
All right. Well, Nader, this has been very insightful and I've learned a lot. And I must really highlight something that Jennifer said, that you really are a trailblazer in this and, really changing the way you do research and in order to understand, bringing the lived experience voice to the table. But we are more than grateful and thank you for your time today and your expertise. It's been a great conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for really the support from you all, because we do call upon you now, right? So that's one of the problems that you now have when you get involved in research with us.
It's not a problem.
It's we get in touch a lot. And my trainees always say it, right? It's the highlight for them is is meeting with and talking with people like you, because it gives their work meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It gives meaning to them for wanting to come in every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we're training the best generation of scientists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have a phenomenal team, Nader. Such a pleasure to have this opportunity to interact. And we'd also like to thank everyone for tuning in to the Action on Pain podcast today. And no doubt you've taken away nuggets of learning yourselves. And we hope this episode will help shed light on the important work being done in Canada at Queen's University through Nader Ghasemlou's lab, and overall in Canada as guided by the Health Canada's An Action Plan for Pain in Canada. And so until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nader.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Action on Pain. If you enjoyed the discussion, please follow us on your preferred podcast platform to stay updated, and please share with your networks. A 5-star rating and review would help others find our show. Your feedback is important.
This podcast does not contain any medical advice. Please consult with your doctor if you have any questions or concerns.
The Action on Pain podcast is made possible by the generous support of the Chronic Pain Network, a national research and knowledge mobilization network.
The views, opinions, and content shared by hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Chronic Pain Network or its funders.